So, just as a sort of quick intro, um, my PhD, as many of you are doing your PhDs, mine took me far too long. I took 10 and a half years to get my PhD. So don't be like me. Get it done early. So I started lecturing 2 years into my PhD. So I was full-time lecturing before I'd completed, which slowed me down significantly. My PhD was from Otago, and it was on neural networks and AI systems. Since 2004, I've been teaching game development. I still teach to NTNU in Norway at 20%. And I have been for the last 7 years because I came back to New Zealand in 2018. And so I also have an adjunct position at CQU talking about education and AI components. Now, I also was involved in writing the New Zealand Royal Society's policy on AI and research. So I've been thinking about this space for a while. I've been involved in the university's policy writing stuff. So yeah, I've got a background in this stuff. So what I thought we might do is talk about some background, talk about AI and document analysis and document writing, and then do a whole bunch of Q&A with you if we can, because I think your questions are also going to be really important to shaping where I go with this presentation. Happy for you to interrupt me at any moment. Just yell out or kind of yeah, find a way of getting my attention. Um, and then we can I can respond to those questions. So don't feel that you have to wait to the end. Okay, so I'm going to ask some questions as we go. Hopefully you've all heard of generative AI. Yes. Yes, good. Good. You've all heard of generative. So, um, generative AI is well, has developed recently over the last 3 or 4 years, and is changing the way we think about how we use AI as a tool. So, what the key thing about generative AI is that it's kind of hacked the communication of humanity, right? It's started to understand language. Before that, it was computers were generally just dealing with numbers, and their understanding of human language was pretty limited. But now the generative AIs and particularly these really vast large language models have been able to extract meaning from words. And so we're now in a sort of layers of interpretation of what's going on in language, how we use language to communicate with each other, how we use language to create instructions. Now, if you think of Gen AI like a car, we have to learn how to use that car because yes, traditionally we've had to walk everywhere. And that certainly helped us stay fit because, walking is good for your body. But now we've got this amazing tool that allows us to get anywhere really, really quickly. Unfortunately, we have to also make sure that we're doing that safely, that we understand the road rules, and that we're not losing the other values of going from one place to another, the fitness, the fresh air, the time to speak, to talk with people, all of those other things that we might lose if we just get in cars and end up in our destination. So we're going to have to use AI effectively to support us in our journeys rather than replace us in trying to just get to a destination. So um, I've been working in AI a long time, and I chose neural networks when it was unpopular. So when I was doing my PhD, it was like we were the sad kids in the back who always got things wrong and weren't able to ever solve problems. And all the symbolic people were able to get much more done. But we were working, and eventually, it got better. But neural networks has sort of come for a whole bunch of other areas of AI. So now you're kind of seeing neural networks moving into traditional symbolic areas around understanding complex systems, expert system analysis, data analysis. So the neural network aspects and the generative AI is kind of going everywhere. Okay, so just to give some is grounded in what we're talking about with generative AI. Uh, Generative AI, it understands language through understanding tokens that are words. So, or parts of words. So if you have a look at a sentence and you look at a tokenizer, you have things like demystify is three tokens because demystify wasn't in the core dictionary of OpenAI. Dunedin wasn't in the core dictionary OpenAI. That's two tokens, so it's done and eaten. Implementing is in the dictionary of about 80,000 to 100,000 words, and so it gets a single token. Right? Unlock as a word is the 50,779th actual token. Right? So this is so when we talk about tokens and you talk about the tokenization, the cost of tokens, it is actually these subcomponents of words, if they're in the dictionary, whole words, which are then combined to extract or to be the basis for how we understand meaning. And so I can share the repo with you, this presentation with you. This is the link to the tokenizer. You can go and have a look at they've added the 4.0 and mini 4.0 tokenizer, and any text you put in here, it will show you the tokens. Right? Just so you can see what's happening with those tokenizers. Now, the tokens don't hold actual meaning because the order in which a word occurs in the dictionary isn't particularly interesting. What is interesting is that we move from tokens to vectors. Now, if you think of a concept like an apple, right? And you have the word apple, you also have apple in different languages, but apples have a whole bunch of characteristics. Some of them are like, it's like oranges and they're like bananas. They're also like, balls, and they're kind of red. So, or they might be green, right? So they might be green like a leaf, or they might be you red like blood. So there are a whole bunch of characteristics. Apples might be sweet. Apples grow outside. They float in water. So there's a whole bunch of characteristics. When you have a word like apple and you turn it into a token, you then have to work out, you then get this idea of a token being connected to a whole list of features. So when we look at the word him and her, this is the start of the token where, they are both negative 0.014 on the very first item on the characteristics that make up a word. Now, these characteristics were a few hundred long. By ChatGPT 3, they were 4,000 long. The models now have them around 16,000 different characteristics that make up the conceptual space for a word. Now, we don't actually define what those characteristics are. So, for example, when we say, I don't know what this first characteristic is. Nobody knows what that actually represents. We just know that there'll be some words, him and her, will be similar in that characteristic and different in other characteristics. When we look at that as a space, we get this idea that, in a multi-dimensional space, there'll be an area which is where men are, and that will be all the word man and the word him will have a whole bunch of similarity. Now, interestingly, when you look at the difference between him and her, you'll get a vector, right? Which will be low on this one and slightly negative because it goes further negative here, slightly negative on this one and so on. That vector, when you take the difference between him and her and you take that difference and you add it to the word king, you get near the word queen because the relationships between those concepts are maintained in this multi-dimensional concept space, right? And they've found that, the relationships between men and women are maintained, the past tense relationship is maintained, the city to capital is maintained, right? So there's this idea that the words are becoming this vector which have complex representations of the meaning of that word, right? And that's going to be important as we kind of understand what's going on. Now, to show you that that's happening deep inside the network, Claude Anthropic, looked at Claude, and they generated a dictionary of trying to understand what that representational space was representing. And so what they did is they generated a what's called a dictionary encoding, but they basically encoded representations, and they used, in this case, 4 million. They did another one, 32 million, and they tried to find things that were consistently close to each other, right? So if you look at part of that space, you say, hey, is there a concept where things that are active, all the units that are active together in this part, are a consistent meaning? And one of the concepts they found was the concept of Margaret Thatcher. And how they worked that out is because they tuned these detectors to detect what part of concept space you're in. And then they went back through all of the text they had in their archive and found the parts of the sentences and the tokens where that concept was most active. And so for this concept, they found that it was active on the word Thatcher and changed and created, strongly on the word her in I clearly remember watching her enter Downing Street. Now, what's interesting here is that it's not responding to the token Thatcher or Margaret Thatcher. It's responding to the concept Margaret Thatcher, right? Because it's that feature is there's a part in this 16,000 dimensional space that is the concept of Margaret Thatcher. And you can see, so her triggers that as well as Thatcher and Thatcher and Thatcher, right? Now, this was actually looking at sort of halfway through the processing. So there's not individual words getting that meaning, but there's this concept that we are representing language space. Okay. So, and we can see when you map individual concepts, they're able to find that concepts would have their geographical location, both internationally and in the US. For monuments, you could find a principal component analysis of that space to say, they are getting an additional understanding of the concept of what they're talking about, because you can see these representations are developing that are not just, does it have this word in the Wikipedia article about it? It's actually extracting some representational value. Now, if we look at that from a word interpretation, we can go things like, the old man's glasses. And when I get to that far, what are you thinking? What does glasses refer to? Which is token 29,247. What does glasses refer to there? I see some of you are wearing glasses. I don't see any glasses in front of you with any water in them. But which glasses am I referring to? Spectacles? Who thinks it's spectacles? Right. Okay, we've got a couple of spectacles. The old man glasses. So if I said filled with whiskey, right, you'd think, okay. Because if he had one glass, right, it would probably be his. But the glasses, why would he have two glasses, right? Doesn't make sense. But filled with whiskey, yeah, it makes. So I've changed the meaning of the word glasses by the context that's around it, right? That's why how do you pay attention to the words around you is what came through in the Attention is All You Need article, which is once you can pay attention to all the things around you, you can work out what glasses mean because you know what whiskey means and you know those relationships. Now, you might have said, well, filled would have told me that it was a container, right? Because you wouldn't if I said the old man glasses are filled, you would have gone, okay, there's probably tumblers glass in front of me. But if I change that to the old man glasses are filled with tears, then it's kind of, you're being poetic and weird. But I think you're probably talking about spectacles again, because his glasses are filled with tears. It's kind of his eyes are filled with tears. That's kind of what that might be. But then if I said his glasses are filled with liberal tears, it was kind of, he's a MAGA supporter. And it's kind of, so the way we interpret words is so contextual that it requires these many, many layers to extract that meaning. And that's what these large language models are doing. And with deep learning, they're actually, GPT-2 was 30, it was 6 layers, and then, 32 layers, and the current Geminis and GPT layers are kind of, 50. We don't know. They're not telling us exactly how big they are. Um, but those layers are what allows it to draw out the meanings by looking at the representation, that 16,000 dimensional space, and finding relationships and extracting the meaning. Now, what was interesting is that when they did this in 2019, they found that the some of the translation stuff was really interesting because if I say my family is from Mataura, um, and I want to translate that to Maori, no Mataura toko whanau, um, that translation used to be done language to language. Now, what Google does and what we can do is we go if we've learnt the relationships between words, what we do is we go from the English to meaning space and then back to English, right? So we train English to meaning space and back to English so that, and one of the simple training things is you remove a single word and then get it to predict what that word was, right? So it's just word replacement. And you just do that with every sentence you can find anywhere on the internet. You grab the sentence, you pull out a word and get it to try and guess what word that you've pulled out, right? And so is that a supervised learning where you knew what word was supposed to be there and you trained it, but you trained it from English to concept space, then back to English, and then you trained it on Māori to concept space and then back to Māori. And then if you wanted to translate from English to Maori, you don't go straight from English to Maori, you go English to concept space and then concept space to Maori. And so you had encoders that encode things into a conceptual space, and then decoders that decode things from that conceptual space, right? And so there's this idea that inside this meaning space, this latent space, there is the representation of human relationships, of like research about the world. There is an understanding of all of the relationships between those sub-symbolic representations of the world, and all of that meaning is encoded in this latent space of representation. And because it's quite good at doing this translation, we believe that it is actually able to fairly reasonably represent this latent space. In this latent space, we now have not just text going in there, but we also have we have images, we have videos, we have, facial recognition tools that are working independently. They now use fMRI. And if you want to see the terrifying, scary stuff around Facebook, recognizing what you're looking at by scanning your fMRI, because what they do is again, fMRI, just a bunch of numbers. You train the large language model instead of looking at words, you look at the functional patterns in the brain and you train it to be able to predict those. And then you show it when you're looking at an image and it can see what functional patterns are for that image. And then it can work out, oh, when I see this functional pattern, I know you're looking at that kind of image. And so now we're able to kind of read the visual processing areas of the brain to work out what things you're looking at and potentially what other things you're thinking about while looking at those images. Right. So it's a really bit crazy. They're trying to do this with whale song, so humpback whales. They're trying to go humpback whales to latent space and then back to humpback whales, and then trying to see if we can align the latent space so that we can understand what whales are saying, and then we can output messages to whales that have some meaning we're trying to portray to them, right? So they're trying to use this for interspecies communication. But we have both the inputs coming into latent space and we have a whole bunch of outputs. So you've got Sora, the video outputs, you have language outputs. Morpheus is trying to control your dreams by using ultrasound. And so you have a whole bunch of ultrasounds on your forehead and they measure what's happening in your neocortex when you're dreaming and then try and drive your dreams towards the dreams you wanted to have. Um, so there's a bunch of really, and of course, Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's purchased crazy company that's trying to take that latent space and drive it directly into the brain and use both in and out feedback. So things are like we're working a lot in this latent space. Now, what are the latest developments? Of course, there are on phones. There's the tensor processing units, and there's transcriptions and AI embeddings. So there is a lot of stuff coming to phones. The major companies are OpenAI, ChatGPT 5. Study mode has come through for ChatGPT 5, where you can turn it into study mode, where it will try and help you by getting you to work out the answer rather than just giving you answers. Their coding tool, Codex, has been coming along and becoming agentic, and they've just introduced apps into ChatGPT so that instead of the AI having to try and learn to control like Spotify, Spotify is now built into ChatGPT, so you can just ask, "Hey, can you play, some calming music for me?" The AI now has access to your Spotify list and Spotify itself and can extract what you might mean by calming and then select the right music and play that for you. So they're integrating itself into a whole bunch of other systems. Anthropic, of course, is one of the main ones that does Claude, and it's the best for coding, possibly the most ethical. Tends to be the one that sounds more like me, which may be why I like it. Is also more likely to refuse to answer you, which I think is a good thing because generally the AIs will answer you confidently even though they're wrong. And that's something that, as researchers, you have to be very aware of that in that latent space, and as it develops that concept, it's not developing it with a sense of certainty. It's just developing it as a process, and so they tend to be massively overconfident in everything they say, and will be sycophantic and just agree with you if you tell them they're wrong, right? Because their goal is not to push back and be independent of you. It is to follow on the conversation in the way that the reinforcement has told them to. Um, Google Gemini, I think Google is probably the most powerful one at the moment, but it all changes all the time. I find Gemini Pro 2.5 fairly good. If you're wanting to do coding, their Vertex AI gives you a bunch of security around data management and processing, which I think is pretty good at the moment. And of course, Google is integrating AI into all your searches. So now when you go to Google search, you'll find that wee AI summary. Right? Don't always trust the AI summary. It will get things wrong. Right? And the thing is, the more you know about the field, the safer it is to use the summary because the more likely you are to detect when it's just lying to you and just discount that and go, oh, it got that little bit wrong and move on rather than just assuming it's right and continuing. Um, we're also moving into agentic AI. So this is where some of you will be starting to see these deep research tools where the AI makes a plan and then goes through and executes that plan and uses tools. So there's now these model context protocols where the AI can ask another AI, hey, it identifies it's not particularly good at a job and asked another one to go and find this information for me, right? So, or test this idea for me, validate this piece of math for me, go and find all the papers related to this topic for me. And that content comes in and then your main AI continues processing, right? It also spends much, much longer on tasks. And that's what you're seeing in things like Perplexity and Consensus and the deep research modes in ChatGPT and in Google is that they are doing this additional make a plan, then work through the plan agentic approach. Um, of course, AI is everywhere. If someone tells you don't use AI, it's kind of too late. If you're using a computer, you're probably using AI. Um, this is an example. Well, so it's an interesting discussion. This is an example of an AI photograph in the sense that AI did the compositing for this person, where they're taking a photograph and it because the mirrors are at different levels, it also has the HDR, so it having to take multiple shots, and also she's moved her hands. And so you can tell that there's something going on here because in that part of the image, she has her arms together. Here she has one arm down, and here she has both arms down. Right? But Apple, the iPhone, returned this as a single photo because it was a single photo, and it did the merging. Right? Now it says it's been processed. So no, yeah, it's honest. It's saying it's been processed, but people don't realize that now all iPhone images are AI generated images, right? None of them are, well, unless you explicitly ask for the raw and get a really ugly photo that's very pixelated and not particularly good, um, because they've saved money by making their sensor cheaper and replaced that with AI processing to make it look nice. So if someone says, are you using AI images? If someone took a photograph with an iPhone, they are using AI images. Right. So we're in a very tricky situation where if someone says, say all the times you're using AI, most people won't be able to accurately respond to that because they do not know how much AI they're using in just using any piece of tech. Um, so Samsung got into a little bit of strife actually about a year, nearly 18 months ago. Um, they got in trouble for replacing a white dot on a black background taken at night with an image of the moon. Because what they realize is that when you take a photograph at night, if you use your normal phone, you're the moon is just a really bright white circle, right? Because the the amount of light coming from the moon is so much greater than the stars in the background, right? So you don't get that nice kind of this kind of visual of a moon. So what they did is they used AI to say, well, we can work out what the moon looks like, so we'll just replace a white dot on a black background with some stars with a pretty picture of the moon. And it was automatic. You didn't, it wasn't turn on, it wasn't opt-in, it was just there the whole time. And so it's kind of, okay, so they're doing AI processing on every image that you take. And sometimes they replace content with content you didn't ask for. So if you don't know you're using AI, how do you accurately report it? This is going to be an ethics problem we're going to get to. We're also seeing now. I'll move into the more research specific stuff because you're doing your PhDs. So AI for background research. AI is moving into all the databases, the Scopus, the Web of Science, all of the databases you go to the library for are now starting to integrate AI into them. And some of them are not, they're some of them are opt-in, some of them are opt-out. Our librarians are still trying to work out which ones they opt in to and what they opt out of. You will find that there are the common tools are all building these AI systems in. They generally ingest millions of academic papers. They build that vector, that conceptual representation, but they build it for an entire academic article, or for they can do it for sections of articles. And when you ask it a question, instead of going and reading through all of the papers, what it does is it grabs the vector representation, that multi-dimensional vector latent space representation, and goes and finds all of the papers that are close to the concepts you were talking about, brings those into context, and then starts working on the summaries given that context. Now, sometimes it'll just bring in the summary it made earlier of that article. So your abstracts are in theory a summary of your article, but they're not necessarily the best summary. So what the databases have been doing is they've been going through published research, generating AI summaries of those articles, those papers, so that when you ask it a question or you ask for research, it goes and finds the AI generated summaries and processes those to see which ones are close. And when it finds the ones that are actually close to you, it then goes and grabs that paper into context and then starts processing it. Right. So it's not the case that it's necessarily going to just grab a word search. It's now going to be a conceptual search. Also, they're much deeper than just that keyword and relationships. They also look at the author characteristics, and they build a that should be abstracts, not abstract. So sorry, some of my spelling not written by AI. That's the thing. One of the things you can tell, AI never makes a spelling mistake. Okay, so this was my dirty fingers doing bad finger things, because AIs will not make that sort of mistake, right? Because they spell perfectly. Okay, so let's see. How many of you have used elicit? You've not, none of you, no hands up for using elicit? Ooh, okay.
Background, yeah.
Okay. So, uh, you're going to have to go and use elicit, R Discovery, Researcher app, Perplexity AI. How many of you use Perplexity? So one.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, two. Okay, so elicit um, is you go in here, you ask a question, and it will then generate both a written description, which looks very much like a paragraph in your research literature, as well as showing you the papers that related to that and a table. So if I go, what is the relationship between motivation and memory consolidation in learning a new task? Focus on the campus and cortex. Right. Okay. So that was part of my PhD. So if I go that, now I'm not paying for elicit, so I only get the top 50 sources and extract from up to 10 of them. If as you pay for more, you get more sources and you generate this. And so this is basically like going in and having being able to read a research paper written specifically for the question you have. And what it does is it will go and search for sources, it'll extract data, and then generate a report. Now, um, each of these, we'll come back to that in a minute. So each of these are ways of discovering sources. Elicit discovers them and then writes a summary of their relationship, right? So it feels very much more like, reading a paper that's giving you a good literature review. Um, Perplexity will do something similar. When you jump into Perplexity, you can ask it. I can see if I can ask the same question in Perplexity. And I should probably log in. So Perplexity is going to jump in and it's given me a much faster answer because I didn't actually go in and give it the additional resources where I need to log in. So I should log into this one. They can, and it feels like, oh God, it can now write the entirety of my background report. The thing is that that's not your goal. Your goal isn't to have the PhD, right? Your goal as a PhD student is to demonstrate your capability as a researcher, right? Because having the PhD document isn't actually the goal of your PhD. The having the document is proof of work. It's proof that you've done the effort of changing what's happening in your brain to be deeper and more real and to understand how to research, right? And the I think of the PhD is a bit like dirty gym shoes, right? Dirty gym shoes are proof that you went out running, right? Now, I don't want you to fake it by just going out there and rubbing some dirt on your gym shoes to say, look, honestly, I've really done all this running. It's kind of, well, no, if you didn't do the running, then, you know, that's not your proof of what you've done, right? So we're not actually interested necessarily, and very few people will actually read your PhD as an artifact of amazing value. its main job is a demonstration of the effort that you've put in and the effort you've changed your brain. If you short circuit that entirely with AI, then you are not able to show that you've changed your brain. And you probably haven't changed your brain. So be careful of using these tools too much. But if you have a look here, and I won't upgrade to Pro because they've changed things. They used to allow you to do more of this stuff without having to have a paid account. Everything is changing and it changes really quickly. If we go and have a look, how's this doing? It's 98%. So it's found the sources. We'll get back to that shortly. So each of these can use AI to go and discover research papers. They'll give you insight into them. You can go and read those research papers. If you just rely on the summaries, because the AI summaries can get things wrong, if you just entirely rely on the AI summaries and have that decide for you what the relationship to these research papers are, then you might accidentally misquote a research article, right? Most of the time, that won't actually matter because most of the people you're dealing with won't have read those papers either, right? So very few people will have read all the papers that are in your thesis. In fact, no one else will have read all of the papers you cite in your thesis. However, the big risk is if one of your examiners was involved with or connected to one of those papers and they know exactly what that paper says, because, you're likely to get an examiner in your area and they know that you're lying about what that paper says or what that paper means, or you just don't seem to understand, they will then question everything about the entirety of your thesis, right? So becomes very much like, if you find one cockroach at a restaurant, there are probably many cockroaches, right? It's only the one that you've found, right? And that's how us as markers look at incorrect understanding of research papers we understand, right? If we go, oh, you've shown me that you don't understand what this part of your thesis is about. How can I trust that you understand any other part of your thesis? Right. So that's one of the concerns. And that's why we put so much emphasis into trying to understand what's going on, is because if you happen to get one of those wrong, your examiner might think badly of you. However, these AI tools are really good at surfacing a lot of research, bringing all those papers forward, right? So you can use lots of tools. Elicit and Perplexity are two of the better ones. Consensus also does some of that as well. Mapping relationships. Lightmap, Research Rabbit. One of the interesting things to understand about your field, and AI can help you with this, and Lightmaps and Research Rabbit are doing this, is that they'll, that should be a click. I should be able to click on it. There. So if you put in a keyword, so let's see, if I put in myself, and yeah, that's one of mine. On Dementia Games. So it looks at that individual paper and then it starts finding related articles for me. Right? And it starts mapping out the relationships between these papers and other papers. So people who have potentially cited me, and then I can go in and advance in the human and social aspects of okay. Money management. I don't know that article. Right. So it's these articles that cite other articles and starts building up a network of them that you can then look into. Right. Understanding the relationships that are going on in your research field help you understand where ideas come from and how they relate to each other by building up that map of who is researching what things, right? Connected papers is another example of these exploring the relationships between academic papers and visual graphs, right? So it helps you also find holes and extract relationships. And AI is getting really good at building these networks and helping you understand the relationships between things because of that latent space representation. Um, understanding what you find. So AI is also helping you read and interpret what's going on. So Adobe AI, Adobe's PDF has introduced an AI that will help discuss the paper with you. Explain Paper is one where you can um, start free. You can help by, you can see here what it does is you can highlight areas of a paper, you upload it and hide, and it will then use the AI to try and explain it to you in clearer text. Right? So if you're struggling with understanding something, it uses AI to help explain it and build connections within the paper and say, oh, this refers to this part of the paper earlier, and it helps you dig into and understand. Right? Again, it's a bit like getting in a car. Are you working the muscles that you need to be working? Right? Are you thinking about this, or are you just letting the AI solve problems for you? And that's the balance you're all going to have to work through and work with. Okay, so there are lots of these PDF, chat doc, so Clarity, um, Humata AI. So each of these is an idea of how you ask questions, you give reports, and some of them are now using, like, you upload a large number of PDFs to it. There are a bunch of copyright issues that are going on. People are worried about. Um, so if you are using illicit, you're usually using the Scopus database to extract papers. Uh, we are currently in the process of not knowing what the copyright issues around uploading PDFs that you've downloaded from a proprietary source to an AI are. The thing is that almost certainly every article has been uploaded at some point by somebody. And so you're probably not increasing the number of infringements. However, you may be infringing. And so we're still unsure as to where we are in that space. And there hasn't been a clear legal position taken by, well, the companies believe that they're fine, but they are being sued by various people around copyright infringement. Um, as we move to open access, when things are open access, of course, then they can have been loaded up to AI, and so you can send them to an AI because they're open access, right? And so there's some interesting subtleties around finding the open access versions of papers, finding the preprints of papers, going on archive and finding the paper that way, and then being able to use that as uploading into the AI for it to write a summary, right? So um, at the moment you would only you're only legally allowed to do that with the free models using things that are open access. For models you're paying for, where the data is secured, we currently do not know whether you're breaking copyright or not. Right? So we do not know if you upload to an AI that you're paying for that to just process locally, process for you and not be shared with other people. We don't have the legal knowledge of whether that's infringing or not. Right? There is not, we haven't worked that out. Right? So currently we just don't know a bunch of those questions. But these are things that can help you dig into and understand. When you're processing data, so I use AI quite a lot to help me process data, but not by giving the data to the AI. It is I give it the headers, right? My column headers, because that's not private data. So I give it column headers and I give it faked data that is similar to what the private data. If I enough for permission, or or I want to protect the data from being sent to an AI to process, I'll create a couple of fake rows of data, ask the AI to generate computer code, R code or Python code, to process and visualize the data, it will write that code. And then once I've got the code and I can read through the code and I can check that it's going to process it correctly, I can then run that code locally on my sensitive data. That way I've never shared the data with the AI system. I've only shared the shape of the data and some faked examples of the data, and then use the code it generated to run on the original data. Right? So there are ways that you use AI to help you process data without actually giving the AI the data itself, because the AI is just writing code. Now, um, you can use local models as well. So I use Facebook AI similarity search, the face index and the face database. Um, and I use a local embedding model. So I download an embeddings model, which gives me those vectors, and I run that model locally on data, which means I'm not having to share all of my data with OpenAI or Microsoft or those sort of things, right? So there are ways you can use it for that kind of processing. Um, we are, as the university is, we're a Microsoft shop. So Copilot is an approved AI that you can use because our corporate AI process says that it's keeping their data separate and not using it for training. Um, so we can use Copilot for some of that. But again, we're still working through exactly what that means. You, by default, don't have the most powerful model. You'd have to ask for the Copilot model through the university if you want to use Copilot to directly process your data. But you don't have to use it to process the data if you can use this kind of like data line, for example, where which tries to automate what I was just assessing your data in your way. And what it does is it uses, again, it sends the headings, writes code, and then shows you the data based on the code that the AI has written. But it's not sending it to a third party. Now, the most contentious is the issues around writing, because many of you will be writing your theses. It is interesting. We are now getting people who have an AI accent coming through because they've learned to speak English by using ChatGPT. And so when they write English themselves, they write with a robot accent. And so they sound like ChatGPT. Um, it's not, and therefore, sounding like ChatGPT doesn't prove you're a robot, right? It just suggests that you might be using AI. None of the AI checking tools are good enough to actually punish anybody. Um, there are lots of writing tools. Um, the challenge is, what is the goal of your PhD? Is the goal of your PhD to have you explain a complex concept, or is part of the PhD learning how to write well? Now, we would argue that you are also learning how to write well. You're not just doing your research, you're also learning about communication. If you offload all of your writing to a third person and say, hey, here's all my data, write my thesis for me, we would consider that a problem, right? However, if you have a friend and you said, hey, here's my data, how would you say this? And you read what they've said, and then you went to someone else and said, how would you say this? And then you went to a third person and said, how would you read this? And they tell you, then then actually you write your own based on a whole bunch of other people's thoughts and practices, and you've integrated those and you've thought about them and you've come up with your own wording and your own thought process. Oh, that's not what I intended to do. I don't even know what key I pressed. You know, Overleaf is excellent, but as a writing tool, but they're adding Writeful, which is an AI. So Overleaf works with LaTeX, and now the AI tool is LaTeX aware, and so Writeful is being added in to Overleaf. So there is AI tools in there. Quillbot, Moonbeam, Scholar, Jenna. Quillbot is one that a bunch of people are worried about because it writes very well. Um, and it can write whole reports. Again, it doesn't verify any of it's true, right? So each of these are writing tools. It just writes the content for you, right? Moonbeam suggests, never write from scratch because, it is going to start writing for you. My opinion is that you use these to help you understand more about writing, right? So the example I use is if I give you an electric bike, right? So if you're cycling places, right? That's good. It's fun. You cycle up and down hills and you get fit. Um, if I give you an electric bike, there's two ways to treat that. One is I don't have to pedal so hard anymore. In fact, I don't even need to pedal really much at all. I'll just go at the speed of the electric bike and hardly pedal at all, and it'll take me up and down hills, and I'll just do whatever I was doing before. I won't do any more work. Or you could say, oh, wow, I've got an electric bike. Now I can go much further. I can go more interesting places. I can push myself harder, right? So don't think of the AI as saying, oh, I have this set goal that I was trying to get to. The AI makes it easier to get there, so I will still get to the same goal. The AI makes things more efficient. It makes you able to find things faster. And so your goal is to keep working hard, right? And expand and do more with AI rather than say, oh, I've got a fixed goal. I'm just going to get to that goal. Whatever gets me to that goal, I can then stop, right? Because the PhD isn't about the artifact. If these can help you write, that's fine, but you would need them to help you write further, and you would want to tune them and don't just trust them and don't just use the text they've written because they'll show you what you can use them for is they can show you other ways of expressing things. And then you have to think about those, right? Um, and you have to be careful. I remember I was reading an article, and this is before AI came through, where a researcher had shown that they had a 2% improvement, but it was statistically significant, so they could measure a 2% improvement in their system. And they wanted to say that there was a small but important reason to use their improvement, right? So, but the phrase they used is there is little reason to use this system. All right. Now, I I understand as a non-English speaker that there is little reason to use this suggests that there is a little reason to use it, and that the reason it might be small, but there's still a positive. Whereas actually what we mean in English when we say that is there is no reason to use it. We're just being nice, right? So those are the sorts of problems you get when you use automatic translators. Bunch of standard tools. More and more of these are getting AI added into them. So Grammarly is now a full generative AI system. Google Scholar has had the the Gemini Gen AI added to it. Semantic Scholar is getting that added. Excel is getting Copilot added to it, which is terrifying. That Excel now you'll be able to go equals Copilot, and you put your generative AI question or thing inside a cell inside Excel, and it will fill out and write formulas and fill in information for you based on the Copilot request. That's a formula inside a cell inside the Excel spreadsheet. Right. So again, if you don't know that the Copilot is a generative AI system, you might just use that function without knowing you're using generative AI, right? Because it's just a function in Excel that says Copilot, sum the numbers above. And it does it. And you think, oh, that's good. It just wrote a formula. It's going to, well, actually, it sent everything off to a generative AI, did some stuff, came back with some stuff, right? So lots of standard tools. Zotero's adding more AI to itself, as I said, as is Overleaf. Okay, so the bits that are most important for you in terms of documenting your process, you do have to say when you're using AI, right? You have to be clear about what is the important contribution you have made, right? Because in your thesis, We are developing your capabilities. It's your PhD, it's your capability. So if you use AI to help you with some of the writing, you can say AI helped proofread, provide other examples, be very clear about how you used AI as part of your process, but not to replace your process, right? Because we want to see in your thesis that you are changing what's happening in your brain rather than just what's on the paper, right? And when we ask this question, is the artifact or the process important? Actually, for the PhD, it is the process that is more important, right? It may feel like everything's about the artifact, everything's about getting that PhD done, but that is merely the side effect of the learning that's happening inside your head and the changes that change to you. Now, AI can help you get there, right? So these AI tools, fabulously powerful. Use them carefully. Say how you use them, but don't let them replace your goal of changing your brain. So I'll just skip through to a couple of these because I want to you out. So use AI to translate things, use AI to extend your capabilities. If you find that AI makes something much faster, then do more, right? Push harder, dig deeper, understand more, right? So don't use it to replace that effort you're putting in. Use it to extend your effort. So I made some predictions last year when I was talking about this stuff. So this was 24 predictions. AI is now affecting the job market. You probably might have started noticing that graduates are finding it hard to find jobs. AI agents and API validations are, in fact, critical, and agents have become the big deal. Next year, I think we're going to see humanoid robots start to displace some factory workers. There is already in China dark factories where they don't turn the lights on because everything is being done by robots. So we're starting to see that come through. Um, we're also going to potentially see some people start to prefer AI answers to human answers to questions because AI will be less biased than humans are. Um, because AI has a known uniform standard bias, whereas humans, you don't know what biases a human might have. So people want the more uniform, understandable bias. Um, I think we're moving into a space where we can't build complete cognitive castles. You need to be very um, adaptive with how you're working because the world may change and may change very quickly on you. Now I can see someone's come into the room looking for the next session. But anyway, so be a cognitive nomad. Make sure that you keep the things of value that are important to you in this process. Think of the generative AI as a very powerful tool. It understands language. It can translate really well. But if you want to use it for writing, push it away from the position you want to have, right? Because you need to describe your understanding. And so use it to write code that analyzes things and then read the code. Use it to generate examples of text from different perspectives that aren't your perspective, and then incorporate those in to your understanding of the field. Use it to find lots of relevant research for you, and then read the research and change and use that reading to change what's in your head. Again, your PhD is about your capabilities, not about that artifact you produce with AI. Okay, so I will finish there, and I've gone a wee bit too far. I can talk about bias and Gemini and gender diverse Nazis, but which is also a really strange, like racially diverse Nazis, which is kind of a crazy thing. But do we have any questions? And I know I've already used up most of the time, but do we have questions? Is there someone in here afterwards, or is we're not because we've got no lectures?
Um, yes, we have a 2 o'clock session, but
There is a 2 o'clock. Okay.
yeah. Does anyone have a question for Simon before we thank him? Maybe I can distribute the Simon's email address, or
Yes.
maybe look him up. So Simon McCallum at email.
Happy for you to to ask questions of me, send me emails. I can help you with your individual questions. Hopefully I covered a reasonable range of ethics. Like and stuff that's relevant to you. I can share all these slides as well. Come back to me, ask me questions. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, Simon. That was wonderful.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So Simon, I might email you and ask for the slides if that's okay, and then students can contact me and yeah, or you can contact Simon directly, actually. That might be the best approach.
I'm relatively easy to find. If you Google my name, I'm one of the two most prominent internet Simon McCallums. If you get my name right. So, and as far as I can tell, I'm the only Dr. Simon McCallum in the world. So my name is really stupid. No one else with my name has been able to get a PhD. So, you know. Okay.
And
have a lovely afternoon. Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
So, we do have a 2 o'clock session, and we have a couple of presenters who are one is already in. Are you going to step up, right? Right. Oh, you're speaking.